Did you dream of being a princess when you were a child? Wearing beautiful dresses and tiaras, walking through luxurious castles? But in reality, not in childhood fantasies. The fate of princesses was far from enviable. Their main duty was to marry, and very rarely was it a marriage for love. Some princesses were forced to marry men who were truly mad. In today's video, I'll tell you about queens who suffered at the hands of mad kings, queens who loved their insane husbands, and those who dared to challenge them. Welcome back to Female Tales. I'm Yulia, and together on this channel, we explore the stories of remarkable women from history. If history speaks to you, like the video, join our community, and let's head straight into the depths of the past. At the beginning of our journey into the lives of mad kings and their wives, I think it's important to first understand how madness was actually perceived in the past. Psychotherapy only emerged at the end of the 19th century, and for a very long time, people knew almost nothing about how the human brain and nervous system really worked. Because of that, in the past, madness was often used to describe almost any behaviour that didn't fit accepted social norms. For example, no one knew about things like postpartum depression, and a woman who allowed herself to show strong emotions could easily be labelled insane. So, when we talk about the madness of the figures in today's stories, we rely almost entirely on how their contemporaries described them. It's very possible that many of these men were not mad at all, but were instead suffering from depression or post-traumatic stress after the wars they were, of course, constantly fighting. One such king, whose military defeat quite literally pushed him into madness, was Henry VI of England, the husband of Margaret of Anjou. Henry had always been a melancholic man. He preferred praying and reading to ruling. He became king in early childhood and grew up in the middle of endless court intrigues. Perhaps that's why he constantly suffered from mild paranoia, expecting betrayal from his subjects, which in fact wasn't unfounded at all, since he would later be overthrown and killed by the Yorkists. Nevertheless, despite certain peculiarities in his behaviour, he still governed. Then, in July 1453, Henry suffered what was probably one of the most devastating defeats in English history. After the Battle of Castillon, England lost almost all of its territories in France, including Aquitaine, which had once come under English control through the marriage of Eleanor of Aquitaine to Henry II, and had belonged to England for nearly 300 years. Against this backdrop, the king experienced a full psychological collapse. He completely withdrew into himself, stopped speaking, stopped reacting to anything, and even stopped moving. The king literally had to be carried from room to room. Even the birth of his long-awaited son, Edward of Westminster, whose paternity was sometimes questioned, caused absolutely no reaction. For 18 months, Henry was entirely absent. And this was the moment when Margaret of Anjou stepped onto the stage. A strong, energetic, and ambitious woman. She became the prototype for Cersei Lannister in Game of Thrones, just so you understand what kind of woman we're talking about. In another famous series, The White Queen, she's portrayed as an anti-hero, a cruel, power-hungry woman. But if you look at this story through her eyes, you see a completely different picture. Imagine this: you are a queen, you've given birth to an heir, and then, during your husband's madness, members of the House of York begin claiming the throne, while you and your son are pushed aside. I think Margaret found this just as unfair as you probably do right now. She tried to remove the protector of the realm, Richard Plantagenet, from the Privy Council, and to exclude the Yorkists from governing the country altogether. And that became the spark that ignited the famous Wars of the Roses. Once again, it's very Game of Thrones. It all started with a conflict between the Queen and the King's Hand. For nearly 15 years, Margaret fought to secure the throne for her son, surrounded by enemies. Meanwhile, Henry would briefly recover, only to lose his mind again. And in truth, very little depended on him anymore. After a series of military failures, Margaret was forced to flee the battlefield and hide in France with her son, forming alliances and planning new military campaigns. She secured the support of her relative, the French king, and formed an alliance with Warwick, sealing it through the marriage of her son to Anne Neville. All of this was meant to deliver a final blow. Sadly, that blow turned out to be fatal, both for her story and for her family. On May 4th, 1471, the Battle of Tewkesbury took place. Her son, Edward of Westminster, was killed, and Margaret herself was taken prisoner. Her husband, who, by a strange coincidence, had been restored to the throne for just 6 months, soon died in the Tower. Most likely, he was killed by the Yorkists to permanently clear the way for Edward IV. Years later, Margaret was ransomed by the French king, her cousin, and spent the rest of her life far from politics. After losing both her husband and her son, there was nothing left to fight for. History remembers her as the she-wolf, a term often used in the past for ruthless, bloodthirsty women. But honestly, I think Margaret herself might have taken it as a compliment. Because when her husband descended into madness, she chose to fight like a true wolf, even though, in the end, she lost. In the history of mad kings and their wives, there is another heroine, a woman who was a true fighter as well. Not for the throne this time, but for her own freedom from a mad husband. Her name was Maria Francisca of Savoy. She was married off to the King of Portugal, Afonso VI. He was around 20 years old, and although he was king in name, in reality he did not truly rule. As a child, Afonso had suffered a severe illness that left him partially paralysed and also seriously affected his mental state. It's still unclear whether he was truly insane or simply developmentally delayed. And in 1666, when their marriage took place, there was no way to diagnose his condition with any certainty. Maria seems to have realised her difficult situation very quickly, and she was clearly not thrilled about it. On top of that, due to his illness, Afonso was impotent, which directly contradicted what was expected of a queen, producing heirs. But instead of waiting passively and accepting her fate, the ambitious Maria Francisca took decisive action. Within 2 years, she sought to have the marriage annulled, and she succeeded. Around the same time, she developed a strong interest in her husband's brother, Pedro II of Portugal. She actively began seeking support for him, especially in her native France. Before long, Pedro managed to remove Afonso from the throne. At first, Pedro ruled as regent in his brother's name, and later became king himself. Maria, having married Pedro, thus became the wife of 2 Portuguese kings, one chosen for her and one chosen by her. That's what it truly means to take your fate into your own hands. Our next heroine also tried to take control of her own fate while married to a mad king, but sadly, she lost everything in the end. This is Caroline Matilda of Great Britain. She was the sister of George III, who, as you know, would later descend into madness himself. His story will appear on this list as well, but a little later. At just 15 years old, she was married off to the King of Denmark, Christian VII of Denmark. But no one prepared her for the reality. Her husband would not be the charming young man she may have imagined, but a man suffering, according to modern historians, from either schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. The Danish court believed that marriage would cure the king. It's unclear how having a wife was supposed to help in such a case. They also hoped that a young bride would distract Christian from his numerous bisexual affairs, with both men and women. Just imagine the situation this 15-year-old girl found herself in. The king had absolutely no desire to marry, and he didn't like his bride at all. But after long pressure from those around him, Christian eventually agreed to consummate the marriage, and they had a long-awaited heir to the throne. But over the years, the king's mental condition only worsened, and then a physician appeared at court, Johann Friedrich Struensee. He quickly became the king's trusted confidant, and Christian gradually handed over the reins of government to him. I still haven't fully made up my mind about Struensee. My intuition, when I read this story, tells me he was a man with two faces. Just as he rose to power very quickly through the king, it seems no coincidence that he also became the Queen's lover. Reading about their relationship, I got the impression that he almost completely consumed the young Queen. And what did the Mad King think about all of this? Christian knew everything, and he was fine with it. He even officially recognised the daughter later born to the Queen. Although anyone with eyes could see from the resemblance that the child was clearly Struensee's, not the King's. Struensee was ambitious, and he launched a rapid wave of reforms. He issued over 600 decrees, many of which were progressive and genuinely necessary. He abolished serfdom, introduced freedom of the press, granted equal rights to illegitimate children, and provided free smallpox vaccinations to poor families. In other words, he was doing good things. But of course, the nobility, and especially Christian's stepmother, were not pleased by the sudden rise of a common physician and the power he held. Nor were they pleased by Caroline's behaviour. She openly enjoyed her newfound love and happiness, behaving far too freely in public, so openly that soon the entire country and even her family back in Britain knew about the forbidden affair. Newspapers, now enjoying freedom of the press, actively published caricatures of the Queen in Struensee's arms. Eventually, the aristocracy, together with the Dowager Queen, organised a conspiracy. During a masquerade, they secretly entered the King's chambers and obtained his signature on a document he didn't understand. It was an order for the arrest of the Queen and Struensee. That very night, both were seized and imprisoned. Soon after, the marriage between Caroline Matilda and King Christian was annulled. Christian, without hesitation, signed the death warrant of his former friend. Struensee was publicly executed, beheaded and quartered. Caroline later said she instinctively felt the moment he was executed, even though she didn't know the exact date or time. She herself was exiled to a castle in Hanover and forbidden from seeing her children. Many at court demanded her execution as well, but she was spared because she was the sister of the British king. Caroline began preparing a counter-strike. She planned a conspiracy to return to court and rule on behalf of her son. But she never got the chance. She died suddenly, at just 23 years old from scarlet fever. And so ended this tragic story of forbidden love and madness. And honestly, I feel deeply sorry for her, because it seems that all she ever wanted was love and the chance to live life on her own terms. But her happiness was as short as her life. And since we've already mentioned Caroline's mad brother, George III, let's now talk about his story and his marriage to Queen Charlotte. Thanks to Bridgerton's, their story has recently gained new popularity. But let's not forget that Netflix loves creative liberties and embellishments, so here we'll try to return to history. In the series, we're shown that signs of the king's madness appeared early in the marriage, but that's not entirely true. In reality, their story was preceded by many years of a happy family life. When the couple married in 1761, George was a completely normal young man. The two clearly grew fond of each other and lived in harmony. And just to put things in perspective, they had 15 children together. George never took a mistress, unlike many of his sons later on. The first episode of mental illness occurred only 4 years after the wedding, in 1765. George fell ill with a fever, suffered from a severe cough, weight loss and insomnia. And then, alongside these symptoms, something unexpected appeared: a noticeable decline in cognitive function. This alarmed not only the royal court, but the king himself so much that Parliament passed an act providing for a regency in case George became incapacitated again. Fortunately, the king recovered quickly and the act was repealed. The real crisis came 20 years later, in 1788. By that time, George had endured the deaths of 2 of his children, the loss of the American War of Independence, and an extremely tense political climate overall. He began to experience hallucinations. His speech and letters became incoherent, filled with rambling nonsense. He started making obscene proposals to women and even attempted several sexual assaults. He also suffered from severe seizures, so violent that servants had to hold him down to prevent him from harming himself. For a long time, historians believed the king suffered from porphyria, a metabolic disorder whose symptoms can include psychotic episodes and even blue-coloured urine. Today, however, many scholars lean more toward a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. Treatment, as you can imagine, was brutal and ineffective. Doctors restrained the king or used painful compresses in an attempt to draw out what they called evil humours. When George became violent, screaming and attacking those around him, royal servants gagged him and placed him in a straitjacket. If the king behaved well, he was allowed to see his family. If not, he was restrained again. Even meals became a system of reward and punishment. When George misbehaved, he was fed mashed food with a wooden spoon. When he behaved properly, he was allowed to use cutlery. He had several periods of recovery, but the episodes always returned. And how did his wife, Queen Charlotte, live through all of this? In Bridgerton's, she's often shown as a rigid, intimidating woman with strained relationships with her children. And it's true, later in life, she did become a strict guardian of protocol, and in many ways a difficult and imposing figure. But young Charlotte, arriving at court to marry George, was playful, lively, and energetic. She loved music and theatre. As a mother, she tried to raise her children in a more modern way, giving them freedom, fresh air, simpler clothing, and keeping them as far away as possible from the artificial world of the court. She understood the importance of education for girls and took great care in educating her daughters. When George's madness struck fully in 1788, Charlotte reportedly turned grey in a very short time. During the king's illness, a conflict arose between the Queen and her son, the Prince of Wales. He wanted to assume the role of regent if his father did not recover. And that is exactly what happened. A Regency Act was passed, making the Prince regent, while responsibility for the king and the royal household remained with Charlotte. The family conflict escalated to such a degree that it took 2 years for mother and son to reconcile. The final blow of the king's madness came in 1810. This time, it never left him. For the last 10 years of his life, George was a tragic and lonely figure, wandering the corridors of Windsor Castle like a ghost, dressed in filthy clothes, with a long, unkempt beard. When his beloved wife Charlotte died in 1818, George did not recognise her and did not mourn her. And so ended the story of a great royal love, ultimately destroyed by madness. Today, I told you 4 stories of mad kings, royal marriages, and 4 women who were forced to endure the madness of their husbands. I think each of these women had a difficult fate in her own way. In every one of their lives, there was a struggle with society and with a terrifying illness that robs a person of the most precious thing they have, their mind. Which of these stories affected you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments, and feel free to tell me about other mad kings whose stories you know. Or maybe you have ideas about mad queens who also deserve their own video. And don't forget to check your like one more time. See you very soon.